Our next presenter is Jessica Silva Mendes. Jessica is a master's student in the graduate program in archaeology at the Museum of Archaeology and Ethnography at the University of Sao Paulo, with an emphasis on Egyptology and collections. Her BA is in history at the Faculty of Philosophy, Letters, and Human Sciences at USP. She also has a technician degree in museology from the Parc d'Ajutud State Technical School. I'm very sorry for my pronunciation. And we will start the video, and then Jessica should be able to join us for Q&A afterwards.
Good afternoon. My name is Jessica. I am a master's degree student of Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology of the University of Sao Paulo. First, I would like to thank the organization of the event for the opportunity to talk about my research, which is sponsored by the Sao Paulo Research Support Foundation, who I'd like to thank. The supervisors of this research are Professor Wagner Porto and Professor Cynthia Gama Roland, who I also would like to thank. The museum that I will talk about is Museu de Arqueologia Bíblica, in English, Museum of Biblical Archaeology, of Centro Universitário Adventista de São Paulo, in English, Adventist University Center of São Paulo. It is a small museum which occupies one single small room inside the library building of the university. It has the configuration of the photo, as you can see here, but they are building a new place just for the museum, like this in this other photo here, aerial photo. The museum was formed from several donations, the first being from Dr. Paulo Borg, a Brazilian pastor and archaeologist famous in the Adventist world. One of the donations was even made from the Rockefeller Museum in Jerusalem. The collection is divided in 8 groups. The ones that are addressed in this study are 3 of them: archaeological objects, illustrative objects, and Milton Afonso's coins. The division seems to be a little arbitrary, since in the first and second ones, there are copies and the same nature of objects. This collection is composed mainly by the Mediterranean culture, with 232 pieces. We include in this category objects from Egypt, Italy, Greece, North Africa, and Near East. Then we have 65 objects from the Middle East, like Turkey, Levant, Mesopotamia, Assyria, and Middle East. Later, we have 8 items originated from the Americas. Included here, we have Andes in Central America. Far East, we got items from China and India, and North Europe, objects from England. Also, we see that the second largest category is from unknown origin with 162 pieces. This also shows us the problem of dissociation, which affects many museums. Inside this group of Mediterranean archaeological objects, there are 84 Egyptian objects. Within this number, 35 were made in ancient times, or as we usually say, are originals. It is important to say the dates were provided by the museum. It is not certain where they came from. Those that have acquisitions documents were dated by the store that sold them. But as the majority of the collection doesn't have their documentation, the objects have been dated, but it's not clear how it was established. The majority of the collection is from the late period, with 15 objects. The dating scheme we use here, it was developed by Shaw. We have from the Old Kingdom 2 objects, 1 object from Middle Kingdom. New Kingdom, we have 7 objects. Third intermediate period, we have 2. Hellenistic and Ptolemaic, we have 4 objects. And we have one object from ancient times, but the date is unknown. But we also have 49 copies. Pieces that have a materiality that refers to ancient Egypt, but were produced after that period as contemporary. In other words, we see that more than a half of the objects that were claimed as Egyptian consists of replicas, something we cannot ignore. We are embracing the replicas in this study as contemporary objects that make reference to an idea of Egyptian culture. As so, they are also material culture, not from ancient Egypt society, but from the society that produced the object, aiming to evoke the ancient Egyptian culture, which is an interpretation, copy, or reuse of traits from ancient Egyptian culture. We know that sages' ancient Egyptian culture is a chronotype, but as it is a short presentation, we cannot discuss it here. Although we need to mention this also because it's related directly with our study. Once the idea of 3,000 years of Egyptian history considered as one same thing probably is reflected and constructed in these objects and in this collection. So what we have is a diverse collection that most of which doesn't have documents or context information, a bunch of objects that were put together, objects that are examples of what is considered the ancient Egyptian culture in a biblical archaeological museum. To sum up a bit with what we aim to do in this study, besides the catalog, I will use the Rosetta Stone as an example of analysis. This is one copy of the Rosetta Stone. It was bought at the British Museum, current context of the original one. The person who bought it, related to the collections administration of MAB, thought it would be important to the museum have a piece like it to its relevance. In this case, the copy is a decorative plaque, a faithful copy in a smaller proportion with a hanger on its back for the object to be displayed on walls. Nowadays, it is at the expositors of the museum. The original one reached British soil at 1802. First, it went to the Society of Antiquaries, and after it went to the British Museum, the same place where the copy was bought. At the time it was found, the objects that were seen as something important were that which had inscriptions, because the materiality itself was not enough. And usually the objects were interesting if they could contribute to the reconstruction of biblical stories or related to it. The Rosetta Stone was found in a wall as a constructive block at the Fort Julian, and when the French soldier from Napoleon's army saw what it had inscriptions, it was taken. As we can see, it was being reused then and is being reused now in the British Museum, but it was not just it. With the post-processual archaeology and postmodern theories elaborated by Gould, Gonzalez Ribal, Latour, Oliver, and others, we have the possibility to consider that all the reuses, histories, fictions, and meanings that one object had and have are contained in it. Also, we had the fracture of the linearity of time, but enabled multiple temporalities and consider the layers of the materiality of the object at this timeline. Now we can talk about cycles of an object, not just life as it's made, used, deposed, reused, and everything that is related to it. Using this theoretical framework, we can say that one object has multiple reuses, but established multiple connections with places and people that marked it. As we consider every cycle of the connections of an object, we have to go back in the history of Rosetta Stone. It was found in Fort Julian, but in theory, it belonged to an Egyptian site in Sais el Hagar and was transported to Fort Julian to be used as an constructive stone block during Mameluke period. In this, we already have a reuse. This stela, something used to inform people about something or mark something, was used as a part of a wall, but probably left marks of this reuse in it. In the same wall, there were another blocks with hieroglyphic inscriptions. And then it was found by one officer from the Napoleonic forces in 1798. The stone was taken to the Institut d'Egypte, founded by Napoleon as a place to welcome the scientists that went there. It was settled at the Senate House, the Heights. At this point, we can see the power of the Napoleonic government over the population, the same power that was used to invade Egypt and to take its antiquities. And we also have the reuse of a house. Its materiality is the same, but its meanings change. Their lithographies were taken directly from the stone. They used pen to do this, but left a physical trace of one cycle of the stone in its new use and meaning. Also, at this moment, incisions were made in the stone's lateral side. But after a while, Egypt was conquered by the British forces, and this stone was taken to the Society of Antiquaries, and then to the British Museum, where it stands until today. In London, were made copies from the stone and were sent to institutions in Europe. One of them was used by Champollion to translate the hieroglyphs. At the same time, other copies were sent to museums that have them until today. An artifact of the archaeology of 19th century, of colonialism, of Egyptology, and the reception and consumption of Egypt. With the original stone, the same thing happens. As we talk about the cycle of an object, we are also talking about the history of Egypt and Egyptology. The Egyptology's foundation mark is considered as the translation of the hieroglyphic inscriptions in this very stone. The stone itself is considered a metonym of the Egyptology because it is a story with Champollion and what succeeded of it. And it is a mark of the European colonialism over Egypt, as well as appropriation of its heritage. And this brings us back to our main object, the copy from the MAB Museum. As the original stone, it has its cycles. This one starts at the store of a British Museum as a souvenir. Here we have the meaning 1 as something that brings profit, and 2 meaning as Egyptophilia, to consume Egypt. We have a lot of objects that show us that the stone is something popular and that people want to have things that represents the stone. It is a cycle. The stone is seen as something important and desired. So copies were made of it, and this conveys the idea that the object is important. And specifically in our case, it is not just Egyptophilia, but the need to display it in a museum as something important, considering not just its materiality, but its previous connections and uses. The copies made from an object have an aura, as said by Walter Benjamin. The aura is passed from the original to the copies, in this case because the original stela is considered something unique. It is because of its prominence that it has copies. And it's because the original is considered unique or iconic that these objects carry with them the background of the cycles of the original object. So consider that 1, an object carries its own cycle. 2, that a copy of an unique iconic object carries the cycles of what it references. And 3, that the present is the sum of all past. We can theorize about the other cycles that the object has. Looking at the scenario, we can also theorize how it had influence and influence the present of the object. Today, the object is inserted into an assemblage of a museum that have as main objective to transmit and illustrate the biblical narrative. The object is used in a new discourse, receiving an additional meaning, and its importance is preserved because it is not simple to reach the original stone. It is a context well documented and known. We have here a semaphore, and in it we have all the layers of interaction with people and places. And this object it is inserted in a group that should represent the ancient Egyptian culture as unique, a culture that appears in the biblical narrative. Although this stela isn't important for the biblical narrative, the Rosetta Stone is important for Egyptology and the history of European colonialism. Then the museum may be using exactly this area of Egyptology and its enchantment. Here, we just consider one side of the multiple cycles of the Rosetta Stone, and as a consequence, its copy. That is correspondent to the 18th and 19th centuries. In our study, we are going to consider another 2 moments of reuse, the ancient and the contemporary. With this, we aim to theorize an holistic approach of the collection reuse that made them reach this day and the actual reuse as a semaphore in a religion institution. Thank you for your attention. I didn't have time enough to pause at the biblical slides, but if someone wants to see it or has an interest in it, I can send it by email. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jessica. I am a master's degree student of Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology of the University of São Paulo.
Hi, Jessica. I can see you are joining us for Q&A. Thank you so much. I think that there are some issues with the microphones, but maybe right now it's working. I hope so. Someone in the room could check and tell me if everything is working. Okay, it is great. So thank you so much. Are there some questions in the room while we are waiting for questions in the chat? Otherwise, I can start asking you something. I would like to know, in your opinion, which are the major reasons for reuse? I know they depend on different time frames and various other issues, but in your opinion, which are the major ones?
Hi. First, I would like to apologize to all for not presenting here, but I didn't want to rely on my internet because it's very unstable. But thank you for your question. And you mean the reuse in this particular museum or object or?
Yeah, I'm referring in this particular case, but if you want, I mean, you can talk a bit with a more general overview of the theme. Sorry, I think your mic is off.
Yes,
Great.
sorry. In this museum, I think that the main idea of reused Egyptian objects is for illustrate the ideal of an Egyptian culture that is mentioned on the biblical narrative. And for this specific group of religion people, it's because of the Exodus, I think. And because they rely, sorry, they rely on mainly on the on the Old Testament. Sorry, my voice is a little bit.
No problem at all.
But in this case, I think that is it to illustrate an ideal of an Egyptian culture, because they don't talk about the dates, they don't talk about places, it's just the objects there. So I think that it's a little bit of something, unique. And the reuses, there are many ideas of reuse, and the ones that I can remember is something related to spolia, that is reuse of ancient Roman and Greek objects in the initial phase of the Middle Age, medieval age, and something like the monastic memorial, something like usurpation that happens in the Egypt. And I also think about the reuses that are because of the material of the object also. But in this case, in this museum, I think it's more for the immaterial part of the object, not the material.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. I love it. And thank you for answering my question. Thank you so much. In the chat, we don't have any questions, but maybe, I don't know, in the room, there are some questions, some comments on the subject.
Thank you, Valentina. And thank you, Jessica, for your presentation. Do we have any questions here? Yes.
I noticed that they sold replicas of the Rosetta Stone. How do you feel politically about the fact that it was actually removed from Egypt and is now at the British Museum? Do you feel that the original should be returned?
Well, it's a tricky question. I can't say because I'm not an Egyptian, so I think that they should have their opinion heard, But it is an iconic object that is from their culture. So I think I cannot say, but I think that considering their that is from them, I think that would be nice, I think, to return it.
Thank you, Jessica. Difficult question, I know. Any other questions from in person here? Okay, well, we have 1 minute. I just want to ask a very quick question. You mentioned that you're working with the museum on this project of tracking the object life of these pieces. Is this something that you plan on making an exhibit or making available to the public as they visit the museum, or is this something more for a publication or something like that? Is this, if that makes sense?
I didn't talk about it with the museum. So in the first place, I think that will be just a publication. But if I don't know if they would like to do something like that, mainly because now they are having a nice place, you know, a place that they can do some provisional expositions. And I don't know, I would like very much to see something like that, because it's something that isn't very much talked about in museums. So it's important to show it, mainly for the public, because in our main conversations we can have it, but the public in general, I think that don't access very much this kind of discussion. So I think that would be a nice place to show it and to present it.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. If we could have a hand for Jessica and her wonderful presentation.